This theme, though, of the inability to recapture what was, I see it. I see it in your podcasting. I know I say that I'm not doing as much research, but I heard you striking these exact notes in your podcast with Ben Thompson when discussing the Mike Tyson Netflix fight. That's in a way a business story about Netflix sports, their technical difficulties, and we can get into all of that and whether Netflix sports is the future. But that was also an interesting cultural story about a society trying to come back to where you cannot return to, and then simultaneously, concurrently going, oh, yeah, we really can't go back now, can we? This is terrible. Why did we do this?
Did you watch the fight? I couldn't bring myself to watch the fight because I knew 60-year-old Mike Tyson was going to be really depressing to watch. I'm happy that he got $20 million out of it. Apparently he got paid $20 million. That's great. But I just couldn't get into it. Did you see it?
Yeah, I was so ignorant about the dynamics of it. I didn't totally understand the hype. And then I saw that it was being live streamed on aforementioned Twitter X, and then I clicked on it and I went, why can I even access this? And then the stream was taken down, and then I went, wait, is this actually free? Is this thing free?
If it's free, if you subscribe to Netflix, I think that's their whole point.
And I do, and I clicked, and I went, oh my God, this is actually effectively free. This is a fight I don't have to pay for. I know everybody else knew this. I did not know this. This is just total parent dad mode. What was it, a Friday night? Everybody had gone to bed, and I started watching it. By the time I was watching it, it was bad scene, and it was a Roy Jones Jr. on the commentary, just really driving home that you were watching a stuck bull just get continually stuck, and that there was nothing good, nothing interesting or exciting that was going to happen, which was my expectation. I don't know why anybody would have expected anything differently for a 58-year-old man boxing.
Yeah.
And I wasn't depressed about it, though. Everybody else was talking about how sad it made them, but I realized that if I'm not paying for a fight, these exorbitant fees they charge us for these hyped fights, I'm not so sad. We talk about all these sports as though we're Roman emperors, and that they've got some sort of sacred duty to entertain us, right? People would go, oh, this has been a really bad NBA playoffs or a really bad MLB playoffs. This has been a bunch of blowouts, as though these events that are not scripted are supposed to dramatically entertain you no matter what. I just went, okay, well, that's what that thing was. I checked out the curiosity. I rubbernecked at the wreck, and it didn't cost me anything. So I don't know. It wasn't really a fight. It was something, though. It was a thing.
It was a viral spectacle. And I'm glad you said you didn't know it was on Netflix, because I, too, had no idea it was on Netflix. You know, like over the course of a week, I'm prepping for Sharp Tech. I'm prepping for Sharp China, tracking geopolitics, recording Two Goats. And so I listened to a podcast from Bill Simmons on Friday. And I was the first time hearing about the Jake Paul Mike Tyson fight, and I didn't listen to the segment about the Jake Paul Mike Tyson fight because, again, I don't care about Jake Paul, and Mike Tyson is 60 years old. But I thought to myself, man, this fight seems like a big deal. I can't imagine paying like $79 for a pay-per-view Mike Tyson Jake Paul fight. But a lot of people are tweeting about it. Bill's potting about it. I guess people are psyched. It makes a lot more sense to me that it was on Netflix. And frankly, when I say I was depressed, it's less about Tyson fighting at 59 years old. It's more about how cynical Netflix is with some of the investments that it makes. Like, this is the most powerful force in entertainment. And I just feel like rather than actually spending money on a fight that people might care about or might be good boxing and like promoting it, really taking the risk, they're just making calculated bets on event programming that's relatively cheaper than traditionally prestigious events, but will generate conversation online and maybe convince people to sign up for Netflix, which is smart business. But as a consumer, the playbook is so transparent. Or maybe I'm a more educated consumer because I follow all this stuff, but it's so transparent that I'm like, no, I'm not going to participate in your viral bullshit that, captivates Twitter for 24 hours because I just don't really care.
That's your millennial armor. The Gen Xers were just helpless against the siren song of Mike Tyson.
They were, and I was getting lectured about it from other Gen Xers, and I'm like, look, I know who Mike Tyson is. Like Larry Bird was big in the late 80s too. I said this on Sharp Tech. I don't want to watch Larry Bird play basketball in 2024, but I guess, he captured some hearts in 1988.
But would you watch a YouTuber beat the shit out of Larry Bird in front of the world?
Protect Larry Bird. Let's not do that with Larry Bird.
Holding his bad back. He's just getting smacked.
Yeah, I'm glad that wasn't on Netflix.
Yeah. It's just, why are we beating up Larry Bird? I don't know. It's interesting. It's more interesting than the other things on a Friday night. Yeah, the Gen Xers, Tyson holds a particular sway over them. And you get it when you see highlights, but you and I, we did not live through that. Mike Tyson, for us, was a pop culture figure who was famous in the way of a Larry Bird, and maybe even more so because of the craziness. I remember being a little kid and the ear biting thing happened, but we've got no connection to whatever the mystique of Mike Tyson was. In a way, this Mike Tyson on Netflix, that's actually the Mike Tyson we grew up with. It's just the continuation of spectacle and novelty and, yes, sadness.
Yeah, I think he fought in DC in like the late 90s, and it was a big event down at the MCI Center. Still probably the only boxing match that has ever been held in that stadium. And, it was depressing then. So again, he's a troubled guy, but also it seems like a pretty interesting guy and seems like his heart is in the right place. So I mean it when I say I'm glad that he got $20 million out of all this. But and it seemed to work pretty well for Netflix overall. Like there were obviously streaming issues, but on the whole, it seems like an experiment that they're happy with on the way out of all this.
It was all one big rumination on time and the meaning of time. It was a Richard Linklater film that we all immersed ourselves in, right down to that interview he did with that little girl where he was asked about his legacy, and he talked about how legacy is just another word for ego because we'll all die and we'll all become dust and we're all just passing through. There was something. It was a Mike Tyson experience, that fight was. And are we better for it? Is Netflix better for it? That's the real question. Let's return it to capitalism.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think like from a business perspective and a sports business perspective, I don't know if even Netflix knows precisely what the plan is for live events like this. And what we're seeing right now is Netflix just sort of dipping its toes in the water and experimenting with what some of this event programming might look like and could mean for the business. Are they able to acquire new customers on top of all these properties? I mean, like the Tom Brady roast, the Paul Tyson fight, the NFL games on Christmas Day. Right now, I feel like they're all trial balloons to see whether Netflix wants to go this direction in any real way. Like they're not paying $1 billion a year for the next 11 years to broadcast the in-season tournament. I guess now it's the NBA Cup. Like they didn't do that. Right now, they're seeing whether they want to do more stuff like that. And time will tell.
Who's this sleazy genius behind Netflix who is saying things like, let's try to pay Mike Tyson enough money to get his ass beat in front of all of us? And by the way, Tom Brady, he lost a bunch of money in the whole crypto scam. He's
let's
hard
make him
up.
whole.
Let's
on the way out of the
Tom,
FTX mess.
Let's have a bunch of comedians joke about how you got cucked by a jiu-jitsu instructor and humiliate you because you're so desperate for money. That benefits us. Who's this person dreaming up these schemes?
Well, that's what's frustrating, you know, like as a consumer who watches a lot of prestige television, the Netflix playbook, like in tech, there's a concept called minimum viable product. So basically, if you've got software or hardware that's good enough to bring to the market and you've already invested so much, you just need to get it out there in people's hands, and then you can continue building on top of it and improving the product over time. With Netflix, I think we've seen the inverse of that story, where they launched, it was a really low price point, subsidized by a bunch of venture capital and debt. And for the better part of the last decade, they had like a bunch of great shows. They had great licensed content, and great shows, maybe overstating it, but they were at least like making interesting stuff that was pretty ambitious. And it was entertaining. And in retrospect, I feel like that was sort of the maximum viable product, where it was cheap, it was pretty good, and everybody loved Netflix. Lately, though, they're just so much more cynical about what they produce. Like, they can't license as many network shows as they used to. And with the event stuff, they're being really smart and targeted about their spending, but there's not that much ambition. Like, I think if they had produced like a documentary for 2 months tracking two boxers, two like Tyson Fury and someone else, that could have been really cool. But it would have been more expensive and also entailed a lot more risk. And Netflix, they're just making smart business decisions, but depressing artistic decisions. And obviously I'm referencing like just an unbelievable library of crap that they've released from on the original programming side over the last 2-3 years or whatever.
Yeah, I find it to be pretty useless for an adult. There's stuff on there that is entertaining for my kids, but there's just there's not a whole lot there for me. There's not a whole lot there in general. And these economic swings, these financial decisions, they can impact the art adversely. I remember years and years ago when that AT&T merger came through with, what was it, Time Warner? I'm trying to even remember how it all went. Whatever impacted HBO. And they basically immediately said, HBO, you just got to start whoring yourself out. I mean, this is ridiculous. You make a few great shows everybody loves. It's not good enough. Look at what Netflix is doing at that time. They make a ton of shows. Just do what you're doing with the A+ content. And I don't know, bro, maybe 100x it. Just make the widget.
Figure it out
100 times over. And the people, I think it led to whoever was there at HBO at that time leaving and quitting, because HBO is just this magical little device where you put in $1 billion in order to make this great TV and you get $2 billion in profit, but it doesn't grow. And there's just this embedded growth principle in business, plus this fear that you're going to be eaten by somebody else. And it's just not good enough. So the art had to be sacrificed.
Yeah. Well, and I think what's unique about Netflix against that streaming landscape is they do have just a tremendous amount of users at this point. And like Netflix has more subscribers in the US than currently subscribe to cable. And so that's why from a sports business perspective, you look at the options on the streaming landscape, and Netflix is a more attractive partner than any of the streaming options. You know, like I don't personally subscribe to Peacock. They actually have more subscribers than I would think. I mean, I think they've got like 30 million, but Netflix has like 65 million subscribers in the US. And so if you're a sports property, you want to work with Netflix. The question is whether Netflix is willing to commit to any of the like tier one, I don't know what tier we put the NBA in, but some of the more prestigious sports properties.
That's a conversation. I think you would say tier 2, but certainly was paid like it was tier 2 at least in the rights deal. Is it performing like tier 2?